It started with a smile. But behind that smile, something was breaking. New York. Midnight lights. Flashbulbs. Applause that felt like thunder. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, standing on stage, holding their newest titles, Humanitarians of the Year. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The crowd rose. Cameras clicked. The perfect royal fairy tale on American soil. But what the world didn't see was what happened after the lights went out. Because just hours later, at the airport, those same two faces, once radiant and united, were caught in a storm that no publicist could spin away. The footage was blurry, shaky, chaotic, but the words were clear. Don't hold my hands. 3 words. Cold, sharp, final. 3 words that shattered the illusion of royal perfection. And within minutes, that clip exploded across the internet, igniting rumors that no palace or PR firm could contain. But what really happened that night in New York? Was it a simple lover's quarrel, just fatigue after a long event? Or was it something much deeper? Something that had been brewing for months, maybe years, beneath the polished smiles and curated speeches? Because if you look closely, you'll see it. You'll see the tension in her eyes during the ceremony. You'll see Harry's quiet frustration when the applause wasn't for him. You'll see Meghan's subtle withdrawal, the way she moved just slightly out of frame whenever he reached for her. And then, in that airport corridor, bright lights, clicking heels, security murmurs, it all came crashing down. But let's rewind. Before the argument, before the clip, before those 3 icy words, there was a night of glitter, glory, and whispers. The gala that crowned them Humanitarians of the Year. It was supposed to be their victory moment. After months of criticism, dwindling support, and whispers of Netflix tension, here they were. Dressed in elegance, walking hand in hand, smiling as if the world had finally forgiven them. But perfection always has cracks. And that night, those cracks started to show. Eyewitnesses say Harry looked distracted, almost uneasy. Meghan, on the other hand, was radiant, basking in the glow of the cameras. She knew her angles. Her smile was flawless. Every flick of her hair, every glance toward the photographers, it was calculated charm. Harry seemed out of sync. When she leaned forward to greet reporters, he hung back. When she laughed, he forced a smile. Something wasn't right. And yet, no one dared to speak. Not until after the ceremony. Because behind every royal performance lies a private reality. And that reality doesn't care about titles, crowns, or spotlights. So what was that night really about? Was it jealousy? Control? Exhaustion? Or was it something darker? Something about power, image, and the invisible hierarchy between them? You see, there's an irony here. They were crowned Humanitarians of the Year for spreading compassion, unity, and love. Yet, just hours later, they were seen arguing in public, detached, distant, and visibly tense. It was a contradiction the public couldn't ignore. And maybe that's why the video hit so hard. Because it wasn't just a celebrity couple fighting. It was the symbol of their brand, crumbling in real time. Imagine this. The same couple who once stood before Oprah, promising authenticity, vulnerability, and truth, now caught in a raw, unfiltered moment they couldn't edit or control. Don't hold my hands. That line wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't scripted. It was real, and that's what made it so devastating. The internet moved fast. Within an hour, the clip was trending. Within 3, #Meghan and Harry fight was all over TikTok, dissected frame by frame. Viewers pointed out body language signs, eye rolls, clenched jaws. Some defended Meghan, saying she looked overwhelmed. Others accused her of humiliating him in public. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had the full story. Until now. Because there's something deeper behind that moment. Something that connects to their past choices, their royal fallout, and their desperate pursuit of public validation. Let's face it, Harry and Meghan's relationship has always been under pressure. From the moment they walked away from the palace, they've been performing on the world stage, constantly redefining who they are and what they stand for. Freedom came at a cost, one that seems to grow heavier with every public appearance. And New York was no different. That night, they weren't just attending another gala. They were rewriting their legacy. Meghan needed this moment to prove she still commanded global attention. Harry needed it to remind himself he still mattered outside the royal machine. 2 different needs. 2 different narratives. One explosive night. And when those narratives collided, everything cracked. Behind closed doors, they reportedly clashed over one thing: control. Who speaks? Who shines? Who leads? Harry has always been the royal, the prince, the soldier, the son of Diana. But Meghan? She's the strategist, the brand builder, the one who knows how to own a spotlight. At that gala, those roles blurred. Harry wasn't the prince anymore. He was the supporting act. And that's where the trouble began. Sources close to the event described Meghan's demeanor as dominant, confident, and unyielding. Harry, meanwhile, was quiet, visibly tense, and unusually detached. When photographers shouted for them to kiss, Meghan smiled sweetly, but her hand never touched his. When a reporter asked Harry a question, Meghan answered for him. It was subtle, but powerful, and the cameras caught it all. By the time the applause faded, the tension was unbearable. And when the couple finally left the venue, witnesses claimed they weren't speaking. In the back seat of their black SUV, Meghan scrolled on her phone while Harry stared out the window. Two silhouettes, two stories, one silence. That silence carried all the way to JFK. Now, imagine being them, surrounded by flashing lights, hundreds of lenses watching every move. The pressure to look happy, to hold hands, to smile like nothing's wrong. And yet, one small gesture, 1 second of truth, changes everything. When Harry reached out to steady her hand, Meghan pulled away. Sharp, deliberate, public. And with that, the fairy tale cracked. Those watching couldn't believe it. Was this the same couple that preached about love conquering all? Wasn't this the pair who lectured the world on compassion and understanding? It was shocking, but it was human. Raw emotions spilling into the open. For the first time in years, people saw something real, unguarded, unpolished, unscripted. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it hit so hard. Because deep down, everyone could relate. The tension between love and pride. The clash between public image and private pain. The moment when one person wants to connect and the other wants to be left alone. We've all been there, just not in front of 1,000 cameras. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. That clip wasn't the whole story. According to insiders, there's footage from inside the terminal, footage that was never meant to go public. And in that footage, the argument continues. Voices are raised. Security gets tense. Someone records a snippet. And what Meghan allegedly says next takes the drama to an entirely different level. Because this wasn't just an argument, it was a breaking point. A reflection of something that's been simmering beneath their public image for months. So ask yourself this. Was that airport fight a random moment? Or was it the symptom of a deeper fracture? A royal partnership slowly coming undone under the weight of its own fame? Because one thing's certain, this wasn't just about hand-holding. It was about control. It was about pride. And it was about a love story that's no longer in sync. And as that night in New York came to a close, and their private jet lifted off into the darkness, one thing lingered louder than any applause or camera flash. A silence that spoke more than words ever could. But what came next would change everything. Because the moment they stepped inside the airport lounge, the story took a shocking new turn. And this time, it wasn't just caught on camera. It looked perfect. The lights, the music, the applause. Everything about that night screamed success. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had done it again. They had taken center stage in New York City, draped in designer clothes, surrounded by cameras that captured every polished smile, every carefully timed glance. But behind the glitter, something was off. The night was supposed to be their grand redemption arc. After months of criticism, fading public sympathy, and whispers that Netflix had grown tired of their drama, here they were, front and center, holding hands, stepping onto that deep red carpet as humanitarians of the year. But have you ever looked at two people who smile for the cameras, yet seem miles apart? That was them. The tension was invisible to most. But to those who watched closely, it was unmistakable. When Harry arrived, he looked uneasy. His posture stiff, his smile delayed. Meghan, by contrast, was radiant, commanding attention like a seasoned actress. Every movement was deliberate. Every word, every glance, perfectly curated. To the public, it was a moment of victory. To the insiders, those who stood just beyond the camera's edge, it was a ticking time bomb. Let's rewind to how the evening began. The gala was held at a Manhattan luxury venue, a place usually reserved for billionaires, political elites, and celebrity royalty. The carpet stretched like a river of scarlet under flashing lights. Guests arrived in sleek black cars, greeted by rows of photographers calling out names. And then, they appeared. Harry, in a dark tailored suit that almost disappeared into the shadows, and Meghan, in a white column gown that shimmered like frost beneath the camera flashes. Her hair perfectly styled, her diamond earrings catching every beam of light. She smiled effortlessly, the practiced kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Reporters shouted, "Meghan, over here. Harry, give us a smile. Hold hands." She turned slightly, her hand brushing his. He reached for her fingers, hesitated, and then, something strange. She adjusted her clutch bag instead. A split second of awkwardness. Most viewers missed it, but the cameras didn't. Harry tried to recover with a small laugh. Meghan glanced back, unfazed, waving to the press like nothing happened. But that tiny, silent moment, the almost handhold, set the tone for everything that followed. They made their way into the hall, applause echoing from inside. The audience rose. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. The host's voice filled the room. "Tonight, we honor two individuals whose courage, compassion, and commitment to justice have inspired millions across the world, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle." The crowd cheered, but Harry's smile didn't quite match the words. He looked proud, yes, but distracted. His eyes darted toward Meghan as she took the microphone. This was her moment. She began her speech with practiced poise, thanking the foundation, her team, and my wonderful husband, Prince Harry. The crowd applauded again. Harry nodded, smiling. But when she continued, his expression shifted, ever so slightly. Because instead of talking about their shared humanitarian work, Meghan pivoted into something else, something more self-centered. She spoke about her journey, about her vision, about her strength in adversity. It wasn't just a speech. It was a performance. She used emotional language, words like resilience, light, and truth, the same formula that always worked for her. The audience was mesmerized. But to Harry, it must have sounded familiar, too familiar. After all, wasn't this supposed to be their joint award? Wasn't this about the work they did together? But Meghan's monologue made it clear she was the story. At one point, Harry leaned slightly toward the microphone, as if he wanted to add something. She gently placed her hand on his arm, subtle but firm. It looked affectionate to the crowd, but anyone who's ever been shut down mid-sentence knows what that gesture means. He stepped back. She continued, and when she finished, the crowd erupted. Cameras zoomed in on their embrace, her arms tight around him, his hands limp at her waist. The perfect photo op. But the eyes never lie. His gaze wasn't on her. It was distant, hollow. When the event ended, the atmosphere backstage was different. Gone were the applause and smiles. Inside the dressing area, staff members described a chill, an uncomfortable quiet. Harry walked ahead. Meghan followed, phone in hand. They didn't speak. A staffer later whispered to a journalist. It was like they were in two different worlds. She was already on to the next thing. He just wanted to leave. Even their exit felt mechanical. Harry held the door open. Meghan stepped through, nodding at photographers one last time. They slid into their waiting car, separated by silence. But let's not forget the irony here. That night was meant to symbolize unity, to show the world they were a team, inseparable, powerful, unbreakable. Instead, it revealed the cracks. And those cracks weren't new. Insiders say that in the days leading up to the gala, tensions had been building. Harry reportedly wanted a lower-profile appearance. He believed too many Hollywood-style events made them look superficial. But Meghan disagreed. She saw the gala as a chance to redefine the narrative, a way to remind the world she was still relevant, still adored, still unstoppable. Two visions. One marriage. Endless friction. By the time they reached New York, the disagreement was already festering. Harry wanted authenticity. Meghan wanted optics. And somewhere between the two, the truth and their connection got lost. In the limousine ride to the event, they reportedly exchanged few words. Harry stared out the window. Meghan rehearsed her lines on her phone. At one point, he asked softly, "Can we just be real tonight?" She replied, "We are being real." But were they? Because as soon as they stepped onto that red carpet, everything became performance. The timing, the poses, the rehearsed intimacy. It was less about love and more about brand. And Harry knew it. You could see it in his eyes. Every flash of the camera seemed to drain him a little more. When he tried to hold her hand outside the venue, she brushed past him. When he offered a gentle smile, she looked the other way. It wasn't hate. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, disconnect. And that disconnect only grew inside the gala hall. During one particularly emotional part of Meghan's speech, she spoke about those who try to dim our light. Some in the audience clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. Because that line, though poetic, sounded personal. It wasn't about humanitarian work anymore. It was about her critics. About her struggles. About proving something. Even Harry's expression changed, his jaw tightened. He wasn't expecting that version of the speech. When the event ended, staff said Meghan was glowing with satisfaction. She chatted animatedly with organizers, hugged sponsors, took selfies. Harry stood quietly by the door, his hand tucked into his pocket. At one point, he looked at her and shook his head slightly. She didn't notice. He was already retreating, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that's the thing about cracks, they start quietly. One missed glance. One dismissed word. Until eventually, everything breaks. When they finally left the building, paparazzi swarmed them. Meghan smiled, waved, posed. Like nothing was wrong. Harry kept his head down, trying to get to the car. A reporter shouted, "Harry, how do you feel about the award?" Before he could answer, Meghan said, "We're honored. Truly humbled." Again, she took the words from his mouth. That's when one witness, someone standing just a few feet away, claimed to hear Harry mutter under his breath, "Of course you are." It was quiet, almost lost beneath the noise. But it was there. The night that was supposed to unite them had done the opposite. And as their SUV disappeared into the Manhattan night, neither of them spoke. Somewhere, deep down, both knew this wasn't over. Because when the applause fades and the makeup comes off, reality always shows up. And their reality was this: two people trapped between image and intimacy. One chasing purpose, the other chasing peace. And that silent ride toward the airport was the beginning of the storm. By the time they reached JFK, all the composure, all the smiles, all the carefully built control was gone. And in its place was something raw, something real. Because perfection can only last so long. And that night in New York, the perfect night that wasn't, was about to explode into one of the most talked about royal moments in years. But what came next would make the argument on that red carpet look like nothing. Because the fight that started backstage didn't end there. It followed them into the car, into the terminal, and right into the camera's line of sight. And this time, the whole world would hear it. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and champagne dreams. Laughter rippled through the air, cameras flashed, and for a moment, just a moment, it felt like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had stepped back into the spotlight as global icons, not exiled royals. But under the gold light and polite applause, something fragile was unraveling. Because while everyone else saw glamour, one could almost feel the friction. It wasn't loud. It wasn't visible. But it was there. In the way Meghan adjusted her dress instead of meeting Harry's gaze, in the stiffness of his smile, in the long, quiet seconds between their words. Humanitarians of the Year. It was a title that sounded powerful, almost poetic. But to Harry, it must have felt strange, because deep down, he knew what people were whispering. Some guests wondered, what exactly did they do to deserve it? Others murmured that it was a PR play, a well-crafted rebranding moment for a couple desperate to reclaim lost influence. And Meghan, oh, she knew those whispers. She'd heard them all. She came prepared to silence them. As the couple walked to their table near the stage, Meghan's confidence was undeniable. Every movement was elegant, almost cinematic. She knew how to perform for the room. Harry, however, seemed smaller in his seat, polite, composed, but distant. The program began with speeches from other honorees, activists, doctors, philanthropists. They spoke with raw emotion, their voices cracking as they described their work. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Then, it was time for the main event. The host's voice rose through the speakers. Please welcome this year's Humanitarians of the Year, Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Applause thundered across the ballroom. The cameras turned, blinding and relentless. Meghan stood first, brushing her gown gracefully as she turned to Harry. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before following her up the steps. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Because for a man raised in protocol, who once walked behind his mother's coffin under the world's watchful gaze, hesitation was never part of the script. Something had shifted. On stage, they stood side by side. The lights gleamed against Meghan's dress, the fabric rippling like ivory waves. Harry blinked in the brightness, shielding his eyes slightly. He wasn't used to this kind of exposure anymore. The crowd's cheers faded into respectful silence. Meghan stepped toward the microphone first. "Thank you," she began softly, her voice confident, warm, controlled. "We are deeply honored to be here tonight. When we think about humanitarian work, we think about compassion, empathy, and the courage to speak up for those who can't." The audience nodded. She was magnetic, eloquent, rehearsed to perfection. But then, as she shifted, her tone hardened, her words became personal. For too long, kindness has been mistaken for weakness. Speaking truth has been labeled as rebellion. But we stand here tonight as proof that standing in your light, even when others try to dim it, is the greatest act of courage. The room erupted in applause, but not from everyone. Some guests clapped half-heartedly. Others exchanged glances, because this wasn't about humanitarian work anymore. This was about her. Harry, standing a step behind her, shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped in front of him, knuckles white. He looked like a man caught between pride and frustration. When the applause faded, he leaned slightly toward the mic, as if to add something. Before he could speak, Meghan continued, "Every one of us deserves to be heard, to be valued, to be respected for who we are, not for the titles others try to define us by." That line landed like thunder. The crowd cheered again. Harry's hand dropped to his side. He forced a small smile. But to those watching closely, it wasn't pride. It was resignation. The speech went on for 10 more minutes. Meghan wove in themes of compassion, global unity, and personal resilience. But the undercurrent was unmistakable. This was her stage, her voice, her story. Harry's name was barely mentioned. When she finally paused, the audience roared with applause. The host smiled, gesturing for Harry to speak. He stepped up, adjusted the mic, and for the first time all night, he looked like he didn't want to be there. Thank you," he began, voice low, steady but flat. "It's humbling to be recognized in this way." He paused, searching for words. "We've met so many incredible people doing real work, making change happen. We're just trying to do our part." A brief, polite smile. The room clapped, but the energy had shifted. His short remarks felt like an afterthought, like a line he had to deliver because someone told him to. And when he stepped back, Meghan took his arm. Tight grip, firm smile. To the crowd, it looked loving. To anyone who's ever forced a smile through gritted teeth, it looked like control. Later, a staff member told a tabloid reporter, "He looked like he wanted to disappear." And maybe he did. Because for Harry, the room was filled with reminders of everything he'd given up, the royal formality, the dignity of restraint, the sense of structure. In its place was spectacle, camera flashes, speeches written for applause, not substance. And maybe, in that moment, he realized just how far they'd drifted from the causes they once claimed to champion. During dinner, Meghan laughed animatedly with guests, gesturing widely, clearly in her element. Harry nodded politely, occasionally checking his watch. He clinked glasses when expected, smiled for photos when asked, but the spark was gone. Then came the moment that would set the internet ablaze. During a transition between speeches, a hot mic caught a fragment of conversation from their table. It wasn't clear who they were speaking to, but Meghan's voice, calm but cutting, was unmistakable. She said something like, "I told him not to mention that part." Harry replied, softly but audibly, "It's not about you, Meghan." Silence. Then static. The mic cut out. But that 6-second clip would later circulate online, ripped from the gala's livestream feed, replayed millions of times. People slowed it down, lip-read, debated endlessly. Was it real? Was it faked? Eventually, a staffer confirmed to Page 6 that the audio was authentic. It was the first crack in the facade, the first glimpse of what was really going on beneath those practiced smiles. After that exchange, Harry stopped speaking entirely. Meghan continued networking, chatting with award organizers and high-profile guests. Her laughter carried across the room. Harry sat quietly, sipping his drink, shoulders tense. When someone approached him for a photo, he obliged, smiling just enough for the camera. then looking away the second the flash faded. At one point, a waiter spilled a few drops of wine near Meghan's gown. She barely reacted, just a tight smile, a polite nod. But Harry leaned over, instantly concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked. Her reply was curt. "I'm fine. Don't make a scene." And those 5 words, summed up their entire night. Don't make a scene. Because to Meghan, image was everything. To Harry, the pressure was suffocating. By the end of the event, when the final applause came, their smiles returned, but they didn't look at each other. They waved to the crowd, hand in hand, then turned for the cameras. For one perfect photo. Click. Flash. Freeze it forever. And yet, the photographers didn't capture the moment just before that. The way she sighed when he reached for her hand, or the way he blinked slowly, as if holding back something heavier than exhaustion. When the curtain fell, Meghan was the first to head backstage. Harry followed, a few steps behind, tugging at his collar. He muttered something to an aide. She didn't turn around. Inside the green room, Meghan laughed with her team. Harry stayed near the wall, scrolling his phone. The air was thick with unspoken words. A journalist who managed to sneak backstage later claimed he overheard part of their conversation. Meghan said quietly, "You looked miserable out there." Harry replied, "Maybe that's because I was." She didn't answer. She just adjusted her earrings and walked out. And that, right there, was the emotional spark that would ignite everything that came later. Because when 2 people build a brand on unity but live in silent division, it's only a matter of time before the cracks turn into fractures. And by the time they left the venue, those fractures were visible to anyone looking closely. As their car pulled away, one photographer captured a final image through the tinted glass. Meghan staring out her window, phone in hand. Harry looking the opposite direction. 2 faces turned away. 2 hearts no longer aligned. They'd won an award for humanity, but they'd lost something far more human. The connection that once made them untouchable. And as that black SUV disappeared into the flashing chaos of Manhattan, one thing became clear. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because if the world thought the tension ended with applause, they were wrong. The real drama began the moment they stepped into that car. And what happened next would tear apart the illusion of their perfect partnership in front of millions. Because the words exchanged on that dark ride to the airport, words no one was ever supposed to hear, would soon make their way into headlines, leaks, and whispers. And those whispers would become the storm that neither Harry nor Meghan could silence. But before that storm broke, there was one last spark backstage that no one saw coming. And it came from someone standing just a few feet away, someone who captured more than applause on their phone. Because that's where the story truly begins to unravel. And what they recorded would change everything. It began with a single clip. Grainy, unsteady, only a few seconds long. But those few seconds shattered the illusion that Harry and Meghan had spent years building. At first, no one knew where it came from. It surfaced online in the early hours of the morning, uploaded to an obscure gossip forum by an anonymous user under the name Royal Watcher NYC. The caption was simple. "So much for the perfect couple. Watch till the end." And there it was. The video, shot from a phone at New York's JFK airport, showed Meghan and Harry walking briskly through the terminal, flanked by security, heads slightly bowed. Meghan's face was tense, lips pressed into a thin line. Harry walked a step behind, trying to keep up. Then it happened. He reached forward, gently, trying to take her hand. She turned slightly toward him, her expression sharp. And then, clear as day, captured forever, she said it. "Don't hold my hands." The words sliced through the noise of the airport like a blade. Harry froze. His hand fell back to his side. Meghan kept walking, her posture rigid, eyes forward. The clip ended there, but by the time it did, millions had already seen it. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, news outlets from London to Los Angeles. Hashtag "Don't Hold My Hands" began trending before sunrise. The internet exploded. Some defended Meghan, saying she looked overwhelmed, exhausted, perhaps even harassed by the cameras. Others accused her of publicly humiliating her husband. Again, memes, reaction videos, slow-motion breakdowns flooded the web. People analyzed every frame, every syllable, every flicker of expression. Was she angry? Was he pleading? Did she realize the cameras were still rolling? And through it all, one thing was clear. this wasn't a couple in control anymore. Because the clip wasn't staged. It wasn't part of a brand campaign or PR stunt. It was raw, unfiltered, painfully real. And that's what made it devastating. But here's the part no one expected. That short airport video was just the beginning. There was more. A second angle emerged the following day, footage from inside the terminal lounge. This time, it wasn't blurry. It was crisp. And it came from someone who shouldn't have been recording in the first place. At first, the video looked harmless. Meghan and Harry seated apart, waiting near a private boarding area. She was scrolling on her phone. He was staring out the window. But when you turned the volume up, faint voices could be heard. Meghan, you embarrassed me out there. Harry, you embarrassed me. Meghan, you always make everything about you. Harry, because it's supposed to be about us. The audio was muffled but unmistakable. The tension was electric. She leaned forward, her voice lower. You don't understand how this works, do you? This is how we stay relevant. He sighed audibly. I didn't marry relevance. And then, silence. The clip cut off, but that was enough. Enough to ignite headlines, theories, outrage. It was like watching the end of a movie in reverse, seeing the cracks before the fall. Because the public had only ever seen the edited version of Harry and Meghan. The soft interviews, the perfectly framed documentaries, the speeches about unity and love. This wasn't that. This was two people trapped in a moment they couldn't control. And it felt real. By dawn, every major entertainment outlet had picked it up. Caught on camera, Meghan tells Harry, "Don't hold my hands," in airport meltdown. Inside the airport argument that shook the Sussex brand. Leaked clip exposes cracks in the royal rebels' marriage. Their publicist reportedly worked through the night, calling editors, issuing cease and desist threats, demanding takedowns. But it was too late. Once the internet smells blood, it doesn't let go. The clip spread faster than wildfire, shared, reposted, stitched with commentary from body language experts and relationship psychologists. Everyone had something to say. One viral TikTok analyst paused the footage at the exact moment Meghan turned away, saying, "Notice the micro-expression, a mix of frustration and dismissal. This isn't a woman who's just tired. This is controlled anger." Another commentator pointed out Harry's reaction. Watch his eyes. He doesn't argue. He just stops. That's not confusion. It's defeat. It was heartbreaking and addictive at the same time. People couldn't look away. But here's where it got darker. Within hours, anonymous sources began contacting journalists, claiming that the footage wasn't random. It wasn't just a fan recording, it was leaked. Someone inside the airport had deliberately shared it. And when that name came out, it stunned everyone. A staffer from the VIP lounge, a woman in her late 20s who'd reportedly assisted the Sussexes that night, confessed to a friend that she'd recorded for her own safety. Why? Because, she claimed, things were getting heated. That confession leaked too. Soon, reporters were camped outside her Brooklyn apartment, demanding answers. She refused interviews. But one close friend revealed to the Mirror. She didn't expect it to go viral. She thought people needed to see how they really treat each other. That sentence, how they really treat each other, spread like gasoline over dry wood. Because suddenly, this wasn't just gossip. It was evidence. Evidence that the picture-perfect humanitarian couple might be just as fractured as the monarchy they once condemned. Harry and Meghan's silence made things worse. For nearly 48 hours, neither of them said a word. No statement. No denial. Nothing. Their official Archwell page remained frozen. Their social media accounts went dark. Every hour of silence only fed the storm. Even late-night hosts joined in. One joked, "Looks like Meghan didn't just drop the mic. She dropped Harry's hand too." The audience laughed, but Harry's face in that clip wasn't funny. He looked broken. And perhaps that's why the video resonated so deeply. It wasn't about royals or celebrities. It was about something universal, disconnection. The painful moment when someone reaches out and the other person pulls away. Viewers projected their own heartbreak onto it. Tweets like, "We've all been Harry in that moment." That look on his face, that's the face of a man who knows it's over. It was emotional, viral, unstoppable. Then came the twist. 3 days after the first clip leaked, a major U.S. tabloid released a still image from security footage, different angle, different perspective. And in that still, you could see Meghan looking back over her shoulder at Harry, an expression somewhere between anger and fear. The headline read, What did Meghan see? Unreleased frames sparks new questions. Theories exploded again. Was someone following them? Was she reacting to a comment off camera? Was she protecting him or pushing him away? Nobody knew, but everyone wanted to find out. And that's when a royal insider spoke up, anonymously, of course. According to them, Harry was trying to calm her down. She was furious about how the event had gone. She felt the attention wasn't on her enough, and she didn't want to be photographed anymore that night. If true, it painted a haunting picture. Meghan, frustrated that her control of the narrative had slipped. Harry, trying to hold it together. Two people spiraling in opposite directions while the cameras rolled. But even that wasn't the full story. Because soon after, a fourth clip appeared, this time from inside the lounge security feed, shared anonymously with a British journalist. The footage wasn't long, just 15 seconds, but it showed Meghan gesturing sharply while Harry stood motionless. A staffer approached them nervously, saying, "Would you like some privacy, sir?" Harry shook his head. Meghan snapped, "We're fine." Except they weren't, and the entire world could see it. By this point, the palace had reportedly been briefed. No official statement came from Buckingham, but a source close to a senior royal allegedly said, "It's sad to see how far he's fallen. This isn't the Harry we knew." Meanwhile, in Montecito, their publicist worked frantically to draft a response, but Meghan refused. She doesn't want to dignify it, a friend told the Telegraph. She thinks the world is against her. But silence was a mistake. Because the longer she stayed quiet, the louder the footage became. And then, just when the frenzy was starting to fade, a journalist dropped a bombshell. According to exclusive reports, there was another version of the airport video, longer, unedited, with full audio. The outlet didn't release it, claiming ethical reasons. But they described what they heard. And what they described changed everything. They said that after Meghan's "Don't hold my hands," Harry quietly replied, "You never let me." She turned sharply and said, "Not in front of them." Them. Who was them? The public? The cameras? The royal family? Nobody knew. But that single word, them, became the internet's new obsession. Because maybe that's what their marriage had become. Not about love, not about togetherness, but about them. The audience, the watchers, the brand. And that realization hit harder than any tabloid headline ever could. By the end of the week, the video had reached over 120 million combined views across platforms. Commentators called it the unraveling of the Sussex myth. Former palace aides said privately, "This is worse than any scandal during their time in the UK." And while the world debated and dissected, Harry and Meghan stayed silent, retreating behind tinted windows and security gates, watching the story spiral without them. But the silence wouldn't last. Because inside that same airport lounge, someone else had recorded something even more shocking. Something that didn't just expose tension, but revealed the words Meghan used to justify everything. And when that audio leaked, the narrative flipped upside down. Because this wasn't just a fight. It was a confession. And no one, not even Meghan, could talk her way out of it. Great. Continuing with a fully fictionalized version using original characters while keeping the same tone, pacing, and structure. They say the truth shows up when the spotlight turns off. For Mara Vale, the spotlight had become oxygen. For Orion Hale, it had become a blinding sun. And as the orchestra's final chord bled into the velvet hush of the ballroom, both of them exhaled, one with triumph, the other with relief that felt too much like defeat. The host's voice faded. The applause softened. The audience rose for one last ovation as the stagehands snapped off the white-hot beams and replaced them with that gentle, flattering amber known as exit lighting. Awards cradled, smiles perfectly angled, Mara and Orion took their practiced steps through the wings. The moment they crossed the threshold into the shadowed corridor, something shifted. It was subtle, like a room losing heat after the fire dies. The smile slid off first, then the posture, then the distance between them stretched, half a step, then two, until their public choreography disintegrated into private geometry. "Congratulations," said a woman with a headset, breathless and soft, thrusting a water bottle toward Mara. "Your speech, just wow." Mara accepted it without looking, weaving the cap off with two neat clicks and taking a single, elegant sip. "Thank you," she said. No sweat on her brow, not a strand of hair out of place. She looked like the end of a perfume commercial, effortless, untouchable, done. Orion, trailing, accepted a bottle from a stagehand and cracked it open with his thumb. He took a longer drink. His suit, a midnight shade that swallowed the corridor's light, hung beautifully on him, badly on his shoulders. Too much gravity there, too much unseen weight. A publicist intercepted them. Sarah Jenkins, all clean lines and sharper whispers, the architect of Mara's ascent and guardian of her image. Her iPad hovered like a shield. Photo wall B, Sarah said, eyes flicking between them. 2 minutes. Midtown Access needs a quote for the late edition. Congratulations again, obviously. Mara smiled for the first time since stepping off stage. Let's give them something clean. Compassion, unity, keep the message consistent. Of course, Sarah said. And Orion, if you could keep your remarks short, we're bumping against the embargo window. Short. He almost laughed. Instead, Orion nodded. Sure. They moved as a unit around a corner where the concrete walls blushed with reflected red from the exit signs. Down the corridor, a cluster of interns parted like a tide, phones discreetly out of sight but never out of reach. The night hummed with that strange electricity that follows big rooms, adrenaline with nowhere to go. Mara slowed, just for a second, and brushed her fingers against Orion's sleeve. To a camera, it would have read as tenderness. In this dimness, it felt like an officer tapping a rowing partner to keep time. You were quiet up there, she said, eyes forward. You were thorough, he said. His voice was even, almost kind. Sarah angled herself, so she was walking between them. The delivery was perfect, she said to Mara. Major donors were nodding. We've already got 3 requests for sit-down interviews. Orion's mouth softened into something like a smile. Imagine that. They emerged into a pocket of light near photo wall B. The backdrop was a grid of logos, charities, corporations, 3-letter outlets that buy attention by the acre. Camera crews squinted, lenses refocusing, a dozen red tally lights blinking on like a constellation that only existed for people who needed it. The host for Midtown Access waved. Mara, Orion, 2 minutes. Always, Mara said, and stepped into position. Orion followed, the gap between them closing not from choice, but choreography. How does it feel, the host asked, to be recognized as Humanitarians of the Year? Mara leaned into the mic with the warmth of a fireplace in winter. It's humbling. Every day we meet people doing work that leaves us in awe. People who don't get the cameras and the cars. If we can use our visibility to amplify them, then that's the real award. A perfect sentence with rounded edges, safe to handle, hard to argue with. The host turned. Orion. He looked into the lens and inhaled. He had practiced something on the ride over. Gratitude, specificity, a mention of the community center where he'd spent the previous Saturday lugging drywall and borrowed boots. But the light on the camera was so bright, and the residue of the stage still clung to his skin, and for a moment the words he had seemed to belong to someone who hadn't been asked to be brief. He said, "They deserve the applause more than we do," and stopped there. Beautiful, the host said. Sarah nodded once. Good boy, good line, and the camera's tally light winked off. They pivoted to the photographer scrum. One together, someone called. Hands, another voice shouted, because photographers treat intimacy like a prop they can move around the set. Mara's fingers slipped over Orion's knuckles, light as thread. The bulbs popped. The grin she offered the room looked expensive. Done. Over. The professional version of them evaporated. In the rear hall leading to the loading dock, the air cooled. A baseline tremor, some DJ in the after-party suite, ran through the cinder block under Orion's palm as he steadied himself against the wall. For the first time that night, he let the breath out in a sound. Not a sigh. A small, dry laugh. Mara clocked it. What? Nothing. You smiled through the photos like someone told you jokes in a language you don't speak. He leaned away from the wall. You told them our story. It's our story. You told it like a monologue. Silence. The kind that happens when both people realize they've arrived at the actual conversation and there's no camera to explain it to. You think I took too much space? She asked. Light, almost teasing. Dangerous. No, he said. Then, honest. Yes. Maybe. I don't know. A beat. I thought we came for the work. We did. We came for the orbit around it. That's called getting people to care. He looked at her then. Really looked. Mara's face, so good at managing light, was unreadable in shadow. There was resolve there. and something like fatigue stitched too tightly to be visible unless you knew where to look. Sarah reappeared, the iPad now a sword. Cars in position. We need to leave if we want to miss the push at the garage exit. Of course, Mara said. She started walking. Orion followed again, a rhythm established so long ago neither of them remembered who said it first. At the loading dock, the night smelled like rain that hadn't committed yet. The SUV waited, motor purring, windows blacker than the sky. Two security men stood like punctuation marks. Someone's laughter bounced down the ramp from the after-party, thin and brittle in the open air. Inside the SUV, the silence changed shape. It wasn't empty, it had temperature. Mara slid to the far seat and turned her face to the window. The city threw its jewelry across the glass. Necklaces of traffic, earrings of neon. Orion settled beside her, not touching. Sarah took the jump seat and started typing. The driver asked, JFK or Teterboro? JFK, Sarah said. We're wheels up at 1:15. They pulled into the current of night, past doormen arranging velvet ropes for strangers who believed in velvet ropes. For 2 minutes, nobody spoke. The city handled the conversation, sirens in minor keys, tires browsing puddles, a billboard for a watch that looked like it told time on planets where days last years. I didn't cut you off, Mara said to the window. I didn't say you did. You think it. I think, Orion said. You don't leave space for air because you don't trust what you can't choreograph. That landed like a glass set down a little too firmly on a table with a crack in it. Sarah did not look up. We have a social plan ready for the morning, she said to the glow of her screen. We lead with gratitude. Keep it simple. No grandstanding. And we include that photo of you with the community clinic director, Mara. It tested well last time. Orion, if you could give us a one-line caption to accompany. Not now, he said without heat. Sarah blinked. Not at the words. At the way he said them. As if he wasn't asking permission to be human. Of course, she murmured, and returned to her tap dance. They slid through an amber light, the car painting the wet asphalt gold. And for a moment the city felt like an aquarium where everyone moved like fish who thought the glass was water. Mara turned her head just enough to catch his profile. You think this is easy for me? I think you're good at making it look that way. That's the job. I thought the job was the work. It is, she said, and her voice softened, as if talking to the version of herself in the glass. But the work doesn't get funded by silence. People don't write checks for effort. They write them for spectacle that convinces them effort exists. And you're comfortable with that trade? I'm practiced at it. He didn't miss the verb shift. Practiced, not comfortable. The SUV fell into a tunnel, everything suddenly close and loud. The hollow roar, the flood of fluorescence that erases faces and leaves outlines. I need to know, Orion said, the words fished up from deeper water, that I'm not just backdrop. She didn't answer immediately. The tunnel asked its own questions. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you are? I need to know, he added, that it's still us. It is. Because up there, he tapped the air, meaning the stage, the interviews, the grid of logos that felt like permission slips. It felt like a one-woman show I forgot my lines for. Mara closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked older by an hour, younger by a decade. Do you know what I hear up there? She asked. A clock. Not a friendly one. The kind they use in games, the kind that punishes you for thinking. I hear it in rooms with donors who want to believe we're prettier than their guilt. I hear it when Sarah writes short next to your name because they cut to commercials when you tell stories that aren't bullet points. Sarah cleared her throat. I write short next to both your names when the slot is 90 seconds. Mara ignored that. I hear it when the outrage machine is hungry and will take anyone's bones. I lived years with that clock. I learned to beat it by not breathing between sentences. So yes, maybe I take the oxygen. Maybe I'm scared there's not enough. The SUV rose out of the tunnel into a night that had remembered how to breathe. Then say that, Orion said, gentler than before. Say you're scared. Don't turn me into a prop because you think the camera prefers single subjects. Silence again, but it didn't have edges now. It pulled. Sarah broke it for logistics. Because logistics is what you say when feelings show up uninvited. We'll have a short window curbside. Security at Terminal 5 has a private lane cleared. There may be a few photographers. Our policy remains, no comments. Like contact, keep moving. Like contact, Orion echoed, then smiled without humor. Even with each other? Mara looked down at her hands. They were beautiful, strong, elegant, filmed in the thin cream of trophy room light. They looked like they belonged to someone who made beautiful decisions. Right now they felt like badges that didn't open any doors that mattered. "Don't be cruel," she said quietly. "I'm trying not to disappear." They didn't hold hands. They didn't sit closer. They just let the car do the moving for them until the ramps started and the signs announced departures, as if endings were a service you could book online. Outside the terminal, the air tasted like rain and jet fuel, the kind of wind that steals words. Security unfolded around them with the efficiency of theater. Opens, closes, reveals. Cameras bloomed at the edge of the permitted zone like flowers you don't trust. Sarah angled her body to block the nearest lens. "Eyes forward, please," she said. "We're staying on the left." They moved, a small procession of purpose. The photographers called names that were not theirs because the photographers didn't care about names, only volume. "Over here." One smile. Mara the dress. Orion felt a hand hover near his. Habit, memory, muscle. He didn't reach. He let it hover. Mara's fingers withdrew, slow, almost scientific. Inside the sliding doors, warmth wrapped them in an artificial embrace. The terminal's light was unforgiving. Too blue, too honest. People did that polite double-take they reserve for semi-familiar faces, then snapped back to their own departures. A young concierge approached, wearing a badge that announced she was both temporary and essential. "Ms. Vale, Mr. Hale, welcome. The lounge is ready. If you'll follow me." They passed a glassed-in coffee bar where a barista drew a fern and milk, so perfect it looked like an apology. They passed a group of teenagers arguing about a band whose songs sounded like midnight on a rooftop. They passed a cleaning cart with a squeaky wheel that somehow kept time with Mara's heels. In the lounge, everything was hushed. Carpets like moss. Chairs that forgave posture. The windows meeting the night at an angle that made you feel you were already airborne. 5 minutes, Sarah said. "I'll coordinate boarding with the gate. No press back here. Breathe." She left. The concierge, Noah, her badge whispered, offered tea. They declined. She disappeared with a professional vanishing act, but not completely. There is always someone watching, even if the job tells them not to. Orion chose a seat by the window. Beyond the glass, a string of runway lights placed pearls on the night's throat. He dropped his eyes to his hands. The left bore a faint white crescent of scar at the thumb from the day he slipped building a fence during a volunteer retreat. He liked that scar. It made more sense than most of the mirrors he'd been handed lately. Mara stood. She didn't sit. She paced to the edge of the rug and back, like there was a wire under the carpet carrying electricity just for her shoes. "Say it," she said. He considered pretending he didn't know what she meant. He was tired of pretending. "I need us to be a partnership in public," he said. "Not a parade." She stopped moving. The quiet was so complete you could hear the zipper on some stranger's suitcase whisper 2 rooms away. "Do you want me to shrink?" she asked, not daring him, just asking, "so you can breathe?" "I want you to let in air. And if the air is cold, then we wear coats. Together." Something like a laugh startled her, small, true. "You and your metaphors," she said, softer now. "They're easier than saying I'm scared you don't need me," he answered. She stared at him, and in that stare was history. First rehearsals, first rejections, first time a headline chose her face to sell papers, first time a stranger's opinion sucked the oxygen out of a room, first time Orion put a hand on her back and said, "Breathe, you're not a headline." "Mara," a voice interrupted from the periphery. Noah the concierge, professional, careful. "Your coordinator is asking if you'll pre-board. They'll keep the gate clear." "Thank you," Mara said, eyes still on Orion. 2 minutes. Noah nodded and withdrew the way good staff do, quietly, but not invisibly. When the door side shut, Mara came closer. Not close enough to satisfy a camera, close enough to satisfy a memory. "I am trying," she said. "But I am also." "Practiced," he supplied. "Terrified," she corrected. He let out that small laugh again. It sounded less like surrender this time, more like recognition. "Me too." Somewhere beyond the glass, a plane shouldered itself into the sky, heavier than it looked, lighter than it felt. "Then here," he said, and extended his hand. Not to hold, not to pose, but to offer, plain as bread. She stared at it. The lounge's light put a shy halo on his knuckles. Her throat lifted a fraction where a pulse lived. Outside, a camera flash found the lounge window and ricocheted off into nothing. No angle. No luck. Not yet. You know they'll see, she said. Maybe, he said. Maybe not. Either way, I need you to know I'm still here when the lights go down. It was not a speech. It was not designed for donors. It was not grammar that would trend. Mara inhaled. And that's when Sarah burst through the door with a face like a notification you don't want to open. They're here, Sarah said, breath tight. Somehow the bloggers found out you're routing through JFK. 2 of them are already at the lounge entrance, and one has a long lens pressed against the glass. And she swallowed. Someone posted a 4-second clip from the terminal concourse. It's you two. Walking. Quiet. And the caption reads, "Don't pretend." It's already moving. The room tilted just a degree. The air recalculated. How? Mara asked, the word not frightened so much as furious at the physics of exposure. Sarah shook her head. I don't know. A guest. Staff. A ghost with Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter. They'll push for a reaction. We give them none. We move now. We don't stop. Noah reappeared, cheeks a hair too flushed to be neutral. She held the door in the way of people trained to look like furniture in emergencies. Ready when you are, she said. Mara's eyes slipped from Sarah to Orion, to the hand still waiting in the space between them like a bridge you don't notice until you're halfway across. Her own hand lifted, hovered, measured. She didn't take his fingers. Not yet. Something fiercer was negotiating inside her. Old deals with newer debts. Let's go, she said, voice steady. We'll handle it at the gate. They moved as a constellation again, pulled by logistics, trailed by pixels. The corridor to the private jetway yawned like a throat prepared for a word. Halfway down, a shape detached from the far wall. Thin, hoodie up, phone in hand, the posture of someone who believes history owes them a clip. Security moved, but not fast enough to prevent the flash that popped like a small star being born. Just one smile, the shape called. Or one fight. Orion flinched. Sarah's jaw set. Noah stepped, quiet, decisive, between the shape and the couple. The phone tilted, screen bright, recording, reflecting tiny versions of all of them. Mara composed to the point of brittleness. Orion braced to the point of breaking. Keep moving, Sarah said, and the group obeyed. At the gate door, with the jetway humming beyond and the night waiting to take them whole, Orion tried again. Not a performance, just muscle memory of hope. Mara. She turned, eyes clear in a way lenses never quite captured. For a second the lounge, the stage, the city, the donors, the headlines all fell out of the frame. It was just 2 exhausted people with the same clock in their chest, counting down to the next version of themselves. Her hand lifted. It hovered. And then, a voice cut through the air from behind them. Breathless, urgent, too loud for the hush of that corridor. Ms. Vale. Mr. Hale. I'm sorry, Noah from the lounge. Don't be alarmed. But, you should know I think someone recorded what you said earlier. Not just the concourse. Inside, time stopped. The corridor narrowed to a straw. The humming jetway became a razor. Mara's hand froze inches from Orion's. What do you mean? Sarah asked, already pale calculation. Recorded what? Noah's eyes shone with that terrible mix of apology and obligation. In the lounge, I saw a man pretend to scroll while his camera was on. It looked like he was capturing audio. I tried to intervene, but he left before I could reach him. I'm not sure what he heard, but if it surfaces... Mara's throat worked. Orion's hand didn't drop. It didn't retreat either. How long, he asked. Maybe a minute? Maybe more. Which was not 4 seconds. Which was not a blurry flash. Which was not deniable. Sarah straightened, every plan she had combusting and reassembling midair. We board now, she said. Phones off. We address nothing until we understand everything. The shape at the far end lifted their phone again. The lens winked. The impolite eye of a world convinced it is entitled to witnesses. Mara looked at Orion. 1,000 conversations had used too many words to land here. Her hand found his. Not for the camera. For the fall. They moved toward the jetway. And just as the door sealed behind them, somewhere on a server hungry for spectacle, a file name populated with a little, merciless progress bar. What that audio contained would not just bend the narrative. It would set it on fire. The limousine slid through the city like a whisper with secrets. Outside, Manhattan glittered, towers glinting with false calm, lights dancing across puddles from the evening's earlier rain. Inside, however, the air was thick, unmoving, as if even oxygen was afraid to breathe too loudly. Mara Vale sat perfectly still. Her reflection in the tinted window looked like a painting of control, immaculate, emotionless, unbreakable. Across from her, Orion Hale loosened his tie, staring blankly at the floor. The tension between them didn't hum anymore. It throbbed. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound came from the low purr of the engine and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of rain on the roof. Then, finally, Mara broke the silence. "They're going to twist this," she said, voice steady but brittle. "That clip, the one from the lounge." Orion looked up, his eyes tired but sharp. "You're assuming they already have it." "They always do," she said. "It's what they live for." He almost smiled, the kind of smile that isn't joy, but disbelief. "So we live for them now? Every move we make, every word we say, edited into someone else's version of us." "You think I want that?" she snapped. "You think I asked for this?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, the leather sighing beneath him. "No," he said finally. "But you learned to use it." Her head turned slowly. "Excuse me." "You weaponized the gaze, Mara," he said quietly. "Every camera, every crowd, every speech, it's all choreography."